Hope, resilience, healing. Those are words and concepts that seem so far out of reach for many adult survivors of child sexual assault. I'm Deanne Yamamoto, Deputy Executive Director of King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. And I'm joined by Cindy, an amazing woman that I've had the honor of working with for the last little bit. Cindy, KSARC considered it such a privilege to work with you and your family during your healing journey, and just filled with gratitude that you are here today to share your story with us. Thank you so much. I know, Cindy, that you're not one to want the limelight, to be the center of attention, and yet you are here sharing your story, a very personal story with us. Can you tell us what meaning that has for you?
Yeah, I think it's important for me to share my story because I spent a long time being silent about it. And I hope that in me sharing my story, I can hopefully help someone in some way if I can.
I'm sure you can. I think your story will resonate with a lot of survivors and teach us professionals on how to better support survivors of child sexual assault. So, very much appreciate you sharing your story. I want to take us back. You moved to the US when you were quite young, I think 3 years old. Can you reflect back on that time frame, moving to the US, a completely different country, and just what sort of transpired after that point? I know that's a long ways to go back and you were quite young.
I was really young, so I don't have a lot of memories of living in Honduras, but my earliest memories are of when we moved to the United States, and we moved in with a lot of family, so it was always a full house with a lot of cousins and uncles and aunts, and that's how I remembered growing up. And in those early stages of living here is my earliest memories of sexual abuse by my dad. I don't really know exactly when it started, but it seemed to be something that was always happening, and I didn't really understand what it was or what it meant. And it was also very confusing living with so many people. I wasn't sure if this was okay or if this wasn't okay, or if people knew, if it happened to other people, if it was just me. Um, so it was pretty confusing just having to adjust to the new place and also having to um, live with what was happening to me with my dad.
I can't even imagine. I mean, that's heartbreaking for me to hear because you were 3 years old, and so abuse continuing on for many years, as I recall. There was a point where you ended up telling, and I don't know that it was purposeful, but something was going on in your life that compelled you to say something. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I was about 11 years old. I was in the fifth grade, and I had heard that my parents might be getting a divorce, might be separating. So I didn't know what divorce was either, wasn't sure about that. And so I went down to the counselor's office to speak to my counselor, and she handed me a bunch of books about divorce, and it had illustrations. And I remember just reading through these books, and they showed that sometimes kids spent one weekend with their mom and the next with their dad, or sometimes one went with one parent, one with the other. And I guess when I was reading this, that's when it actually just really hit me. My little sister was 2 years old at the time, and so just seeing this, I just started thinking, what did this mean for us? Did this mean that I could be alone with him for a weekend? Did this mean that he would have access to my sister for a weekend? Or I wasn't really sure what it meant. And so in that moment, I didn't know what I was reporting. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I just felt like I needed to tell someone. And I told my counselor, just hoping that she would just make it stop, or she would just, find a solution for us so we can, you know, so nobody would be put in danger.
3 years old to 11 years old when you're in the fifth grade and abuse is continuing. Well, telling the school counselor changed a lot of things for you. I mean, you were even confused about what it was, huh? But you made that report to your school counselor, and she's a mandated reporter, so she likely reported to Child Protective Services. And what happened next?
Yeah, so the school counselor did report to CPS, and CPS gave us a call. So I sat with the counselor and CPS and told them what I had told the counselor, and they had questions for me. And I didn't really know exactly what I was reporting. Didn't really know who I was speaking to either. I just was mostly just answering questions and letting them know, what I had let the counselor know. And I was still in school. I was a fifth grader. So, um, after that, I got picked up from school and let my mom know as much as I could what had happened and what I had told everyone else and what I suspected was going on. And she just pulled over and we just cried together. And that meant a lot to me because I'd never told anyone before that day. And meant a lot to me that I had my mom's support and somebody to actually just cry with me and listen to me and hear what I had to say.
That's a beautiful image, Cindy. Just getting that support that you need after telling and being believed after living in silence for so long. That's so important, and I'm glad that you were able to get that nurturing in that moment. So now CPS reports to law enforcement typically, and is that what happened next?
Yeah, so they did report to police officers. The next day I was in class again and I was pulled out of class to go speak to police officers. And once I saw police officers, that really scared me because I felt like I was in big trouble and I felt like I had gotten everybody else in trouble. And we were an undocumented family. So seeing police officers, I was, my first thought was, I got everybody in trouble and now how am I going to get myself out of this? And so speaking to the police officers, my first thing that came to mind was just to try to take things back, try to minimize it as much as I could or just take it back if I could. But I couldn't because it was the truth. And, eventually I told them and then things went on from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders at this point, and that's heavy weight for a fifth grader to carry. And it's at this time then that I think KSARC got involved. Typically, law enforcement give referrals to KSARC to do outreach calls. And so what do you remember about that moment?
KSCARC gave a call to my mom. They were able to call my mom in Spanish, which meant a lot because my mom didn't speak English. And they set us up with a child interview. So we were, I had to tell my story again, but this time it was different because this time I had somebody with me, a legal advocate that accompanied me to the child interview. And it was still hard because I still didn't really understand what was going on. But having that support meant a lot, especially after I reported, my family didn't believe me. And my family immediately moved out and it was just myself, my mom and my sister. And so having that support from KSARC and going through that process and not doing it alone was very meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. That's so important to get the support that you need. And I'm sorry that it was such an isolating time for you at the same time. What services did you end up getting that was helpful to you?
I started doing therapy and my mom started doing parent education. So we were both going to KSARC at the same time and my mom was learning how to help me and she was also learning this in her own language, which was really helpful. And I was doing therapy and just learning about what sexual abuse meant and what it was that had happened to me and learning the terms, and finally putting, a word to what this was. And they helped me understand what had happened and what it meant and that it wasn't my fault. Because up to this point, I felt like this was my fault. I felt like I was responsible for everything that had happened, for the police and for anything that had happened. I felt like this was my doing, and therapy was essential to me being able to accept that this wasn't my fault and being able to understand so I could move forward with my life and my mom as well.
Carrying that blame is very difficult to do. And so I'm glad that that narrative was changed for you. So by now you're in the fifth grade getting counseling, and you felt like you were ready to leave counseling and sort of move on in your middle school life. I know that things got rough for you in high school, though. Can you reflect back on those years?
Yeah, I left counseling when I was about 13, and I just continued on, finished middle school, started high school, and as I got older, I guess these memories started having different meaning to me. And I started having more memories and flashbacks and nightmares of things that had happened and that I felt like, I was over it. But it started just really piling up on me, and I continued to try to ignore it, but it was something that was just really overpowering and taking over my life. And I was just really sad all the time and really feeling helpless. And I didn't want to go back to therapy because I felt like it meant that I had failed. But it was time to, let KSARC help me again and let them be there for me and support me, because I really did need that guidance to help me, change and better myself. And so I went back to therapy again when I was about a sophomore. And this time therapy was a lot different. It was more, I had the terms, I understood what had happened to me, but I needed help to, just understand myself, understand that this wasn't my fault, even though they told me before, those feelings come back. And I never felt like my body was really my own. I didn't really feel like myself. Like I had been, I had always grown up with somebody having, taken that from me. And going to therapy that second time around, I was able to feel like myself, feel like, I was my own. And it took a lot, and it was really difficult, and it took a lot of patience. But I was able to do that, and I was able to finish therapy and come out of it feeling, amazing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what you're describing is post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a pretty serious diagnosis. And you worked through a lot in that therapeutic process and had a great opportunity to be able to get support yet again. And I'm glad you were able to do that. And I'm glad you were brave enough and courageous enough to come back to KSARC a second time. And where are you now? Keep us up to date and get us up to date on what's happening now.
So yeah, I ended up graduating high school. And one day I saw in a listing that KSCARC was hiring. I remember seeing it and just kind of thinking like, there's somebody out there who's really good for this job, not me. But, then I thought, why not me? Maybe I could do this, and maybe I could, use my experience and be able to help other people. So I applied and I interviewed and I got the job. And, quickly when I started, I realized that this was really important to me, that I really could make a difference. And, I was picking up the phone, and a lot of people that were calling, it was their first time calling KSARC. And so it meant a lot to me to be able to confidently tell them, you called the right place and you're going to be okay. And I could say that because I had been on the other side of that phone, and I had, experienced what they were experiencing, and I felt so much better. And it felt really good to be able to do that for other people.
We were so happy that you applied and that you got the job, because you answered the phone both in English and in Spanish. And so people had the opportunity to hear your voice and hear your just caring and compassionate nature on the other end of the phone. And that was thrilling to us. But now you've moved positions. What are you doing now?
I am part of the external relations team at KSARC now. And we are in charge of, raising funds, but also raising awareness. And that's really important to me, is to be able to be a part of that and be able to help other people and get the word out, that we're here and we're ready to help you. And it feels so good to be a part of that now, because I used to sit on the other side. I used to sit in the hall, and waiting for my appointments. And now I get to work alongside the people that were there for me. And it's really meaningful to me that I get to do something like this, and that I get to give back in the way that, the same way that KSARC helped me.
Absolutely. I feel like your story has just gone full circle, right? In the beginning, where you were living in silence, and then have the opportunity to tell your story, now have the opportunity to share your story, now have opportunity to help and assist others and get awareness out there. I think that's an amazing story to tell. Is there one message that you would like to share with others who might be experiencing something similar as you did?
Yeah, what I hope that people listening to me today took away from this is that there is hope, and that they deserve to be surrounded by people who support them and believe them. And KSARC is ready to do that for them. And all they need to do is, give us a call. And there's people here 24/7 ready for them and waiting for them to give us that call.
We're just so appreciative of you sharing with us today. Thank you so much.